snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to tell you about 3 audiobooks that I recently listened to, because I did predominantly listen to these books rather than sit down and read them. I don't have any of them in physical or Kindle edition, so I just listened to all of these. They're all YA books, and the first one I picked up because I wanted to go and see Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, the film, so of course it was the book by Ransom Riggs. I have heard lots of good things about this series over the past few years from people on BookTube. I've always seen them on like the bestseller tables, and I've always seen them prominently displayed in bookshops, things like that, so I definitely thought that this would be a decent series. I wasn't sure if it would be a series I would really enjoy. It turns out I do really like this series, particularly in audio format. Now, I will say for audio format of this series, you do miss out on the pictures. There are photographs within these books, which I know a lot of people say really add to the sense of the creepy story. There were some moments where maybe having the photograph would have benefited me, but realistically, I think the creepy voice acting was a little bit more creepy for me. It kind of brought the story a little bit more to life, and I was listening to this at times when it was dark outside and I was just chilling at home, and it was a bit creepy, like a little bit more than I expected it to be, so that was cool. The voice narrator for this is Jessie Bernstein, and I think that Jessie did a really good job narrating this audiobook. It does sound like quite a young boy is telling the story, which is what the character is. In this story, we are following a young boy who has grown up with his grandfather and his parents in his life, and his grandfather has always told him stories of when he used to live in a children's home on an island with a load of peculiar children. So that's a pretty exciting beginning to the book. But as Jacob gets older, he realises that maybe his grandfather stretched the truth a little bit, maybe it's not quite real. Some of the people that his grandfather told him about, for example, one of them can fly and has to be held down by lead boots. He doesn't really think that that's real anymore. He gets teased about it at school, and he just thinks, maybe my grandfather's lied to me. As we go on, we see that his grandfather becomes a bit senile and gets a lot older, and it just seems as though Jacob is not really getting through to him anymore. So one day he gets a very panicked call from his grandfather, and he goes over to his house to try and help him and calm him down, only to find that his grandfather has been killed. Now, this all happens very early on, so it's not a spoiler, but after that point, Jacob is having a lot of therapy. He sees some things that he shouldn't have, and he's very freaked out by the whole experience, and he feels as though he's just not really sure what to do with himself, because he was very close to his grandfather when he was. The interesting thing about this is that the story kind of takes a different turn from that point on, because Jacob goes to this island to try and discover about his grandfather's past and find out if any of it was real, and it turns out that there's a lot of really interesting things that happen there. I won't say any more, but I just think that this is quite a creepy audiobook, and I'm sure that the pictures would add that creepy element to the physical book. I really enjoyed this, way more than I expected to. I have to say I kind of stayed away from it because of the hype, and that was my mistake, because I've now picked up the second one in the series in order to read it soon. I think it's going to be a good one, and I would definitely recommend the audiobook or the physical book. I have looked at the pictures in the physical book in the bookshop, and they do look very cool. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely say well worth picking up and checking out if you're interested. The next story that I have to talk to you guys about is Labyrinth Lost, which is written by Zoraida Cordova. This has very interesting Latin American themes to it, so it's definitely different from what I would normally see in a YA book, and I really like that. In this story, we follow a young girl called Alex, and she is a bruja, which basically means that she is magical and she has these very cool powers, but she's absolutely terrified of them. She's really scared of her powers, and she does not want to use them, so she doesn't even admit to her family and friends that she has them. She just tries to live in denial and hope that no one will ask her about them or anything. However, when her death day approaches, which is kind of a big celebration day in her community, she knows that something is changing and something is going to happen to make her release these powers, and she does so, and things go horribly wrong because she's never learned to control them. And so what happens, instead of having a fun day, is that she actually realizes the full extent of her powers, which are super powerful, and she banishes her own family to Los Lagos, which is kind of this purgatory in-between world where they are just abandoned there, and she doesn't even know if she'll ever get them back. So she goes on a mission to try and do so. The thing I liked about this was definitely the sort of Latin American influences, the culture, the Brujas and the Los Lagos, and all of this really, really interesting stuff that was coming into the story. The narrator of the audiobook is called Almarie Guerra, and Almarie actually is fantastic at narrating this. I mean, I don't know whether the accents were spot on because I don't know very much about that accent, but I think the way that she said all of the Latin American words was fantastic, and I certainly felt as though it was genuine, it was authentic, it was exciting, and it kept me intrigued in the story throughout. Now, the problem I had with this story is that I didn't feel like I knew the characters that well. However, I do believe this is the first one in the series, much as the last one was, so I think maybe with time we'll get to know them a bit more. I liked this. I definitely loved the diverse elements. I think that really made it stand out from the crowd for me. But in the end, I did give this a 3.5 as well. Again, it is one I would recommend for YA readers if you like YA, or if you want to just try a little bit of a diverse YA, then it's a really, really good one. The last one I have is one I was sent a free credit for, and that is S.C. Flynn's Children of the Different. Now, I would say this is a YA series. I'm not entirely sure if it is going to be a series or a standalone, but it definitely feels like a series beginning to me, or it could have the potential to be a series. This is set in Australia, which is, again, something quite different and interesting. I haven't read a huge amount of books set in Australia, so I quite enjoyed being able to see something different in this book. In this story, we meet two characters who are brother and sister, and they have had this really strong bond throughout all of their lives. They are called Arika, who is female, and Nara, who is male, and they are twins, and they've always had this connection all of their lives between them. And I don't just mean like a connection as being twins, like they have a mental connection that they can like talk to each other and stuff, so that's pretty cool. In this world, it's kind of a dystopian world. There was this event called The Changing many years back, and since that event, lots of people have gained powers of some kind, some weird power, and it basically means that everyone is kind of different, and they all go through this changing, this event when they become a teenager. They go through the changing. It's like a different version of puberty, but it gives you magic sometimes if you survive, or it can turn you mad. It's kind of a good or a bad thing depending on how you go through it. And so we follow the story when Arika has just gone into her changing. She is in this other world that is very surreal, very odd, and she's not really sure what's going on, and then she realizes it's her changing, and she's got to fight her way through it and go up against many different crazy, horrible, nasty, weird things to get through it, and hopefully come back and see her brother Nara and hopefully help him through his changing as well. They've both known it's near to them for a while because they know that it's kind of teenage age where this happens to most people, and the story is quite an action-packed one. We follow them as they go through the changing world, and they also go through the real world, and there are different events happening in each of them. Again, the narrator for this one was called Stephen Briggs, and he was really, really good. He is Australian, and that gave the actual audiobook the real sense of it being set in Australia. I think if I'd been reading this, I would have found it a lot harder to visualize or imagine the Australian accent, because I am terrible at imagining or imitating accents, just utterly horrible at accents. So I was really grateful to have a narrator who was from Australia, who could do all of the accents really fantastically well and bring these characters more to life for me than it would have been had I sat and read the book. So I think what I've learned from doing this experience of like listening to these YA books that are all a little bit diverse somehow. One has really strange characters who can do very magical things. One is set in Latin America and one is set in Australia. All of them are very interesting in their own way. I think what I've learned is that I love a narrator who can then bring that voice to life for me, especially if it is from somewhere completely different to where I live and what I know. I really, really like that, and I think all of these narrators did that for me. I would hugely recommend the audiobooks of them all. I would love to hear if you guys have read any of these books. Do let me know down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.